I just made an update video talking about how it has been up to this point eating low FODMAP, and I thought that I would make another one and just kind of talk a little bit more about what I've noticed and things that I really didn't pay attention to before I started this, and maybe it can be helpful to somebody who decides to um, try to do this at some point too. And it's pretty confusing to me, at least. So I thought that I would just kind of share, what I noticed or what I'm feeling right now. So today I had a lot of, I guess, second thoughts about how long I'm going to stick with this for. So initially, I really wanted to try to stick with it for 6 weeks because when I first started it, I heard that you could do this for up to 6 weeks to, give your body a chance to kind of readjust and heal and all of that. So in my mind, I like to try to do everything to the extreme most of the time. And so I was thinking that if I tried to make it to 6 weeks, that that would give me like the greatest benefit overall from trying to eat this way and trying to help my body to readjust. And I didn't really look into, the recommendations overall as to how long most people typically try to eat this way for or anything like that. I just remember seeing 6 weeks was like the full amount of time, and so that's what my mind kind of got set to. And I didn't look a whole lot into other aspects of it as well. So what I knew when I started it was that I knew that you weren't supposed to have gluten, dairy, or other foods that contained like fructose or fructans, like garlic, onion, apples, mangoes, you know, um, high fructose things. You weren't supposed to eat that. So that's just kind of the guideline that I used up to this point, um, trying to follow low FODMAP was no dairy, no gluten, and an avoidance of fructose, basically. So today I noticed that I was experiencing a lot of just weakness in my legs, feeling like my blood sugar was really messed up, feeling like I was just really weak, did not feel good, um, and like my heart rate was kind of out of whack. I try to remind myself that before I even started trying to do this, I wasn't feeling good. And that's the whole reason why I started this to begin with. And that it's not necessarily the way that I'm eating that's causing it. It is overall just, my health conditions and all of that. And I try to remind myself that there have been many times throughout my journey where I've experienced things like leg weakness and feeling like my electrolytes are out of whack. So it's not necessarily due to this way of eating. However, I get really confused and overwhelmed with how good changes like this are for me overall, for my body, due to the fact that my mom was diagnosed with mitochondrial disease. She suffered immensely throughout her entire life and just physically, mentally, all of that, and was really dismissed by a lot of people and by, just the medical field in general with, labeling her as it was all in her head. She was a hypochondriac, that she basically was fine when she wasn't. And so when she finally got diagnosed, it was about 10 years ago, which was about 10 years before she passed away. She passed away about a year and 5 or 6 months ago now. And this disease, mitochondrial disease, is brutal. And I can say that because I saw firsthand, what it looks like and all of that. Her condition is really misunderstood as well. And it is hard to get a diagnosis. It often goes undiagnosed or misdiagnosed for a lot of people. There's not a lot of medical professionals that really understand mitochondrial disease or, know how to diagnose it. My mom was diagnosed through a muscle biopsy. And her doctor that diagnosed her retired shortly after diagnosing her, but had told her that he really wanted to see both me and my brother because we have what my mom was diagnosed with. You inherit your mitochondria from your mom. And so if your mom has mitochondrial disease, you will inherit that from her. It is almost 100% genetic. If your mother has sons and daughters, her sons will be affected but not go to pass it along to his children, but the daughters will be affected and will pass it along to their children as well. I have had a lot of difficulty with my own journey through my health conditions because when I have made my specialists aware that my mom had mitochondrial disease, they don't know a whole lot about it. And because my mom either didn't know or didn't remember what type of mitochondrial disease she was diagnosed with specifically, my specialists look at that as being, I guess, like a roadblock in trying to further assess me for it because my mom didn't have the specific type listed in her diagnosis. So I have the paper where she was diagnosed and it, says that she was clinically diagnosed with mitochondrial disease, but it doesn't list, like I said, the actual type. There's many different types. Some of them are more common than others. And the ones that are more common, I think, are easier to diagnose through testing and easier to find. But there are a lot of mitochondrial diseases where you might be the only person in the entire world that has that specific genetic mutation of mitochondrial disease and in form of mitochondrial disease. And so it makes it really hard, I think, for doctors to break it down and really want to because it is so complex and so hard to diagnose. And so what my specialist ended up doing was they won't rule out that I have mitochondrial disease and they won't say that I don't have it, but they also won't say for sure that I do. And instead, they just put me on a mitochondrial cocktail, which is supplements designed to support your mitochondria, like CoQ10, L-carnitine, alpha-lipoic acid, riboflavin, and creatine powder. And there is no cure for this disease, but you can take supplements. The supplements are kind of not really that beneficial for most people, to my understanding. They don't make like some sort of a dramatic difference or whatever. I haven't tried most of them for the simple reason being that I can only afford so many things and it's not covered by insurance. And so I focus on the supplements that I know are dire to me right now due to like nutritional deficiencies that I have or needing my digestive system to function and needing to, get medicine for that. And so it's really sad because you can't really, when you have these chronic health issues and you're not an extremely wealthy person, you have to kind of pick and choose what is most important to try to address at a given time because you can't do it all. And so I have discovered through researching about my mom's condition, and then also finding out about my own, the EDS, the POTS, and the mast cell activation disorder, that there have been people that I've come across who have shared their journey through their chronic illnesses. And I was just kind of shocked, I guess, by their journey when I realized that they were either diagnosed with mitochondrial disease as well as these other conditions that I was diagnosed with, or it was suspected that they had mitochondrial disease because they have Ehlers-Danlos and POTS and mast cell activation. And I will put links of the ones that I found to be most interesting in the description below, because I feel like, there's a lot of information that I have come across that I would have never connected the dots to, I guess. If I hadn't been diagnosed with what I was, and if my mom wasn't diagnosed with what she has been or was diagnosed with. And so I just thought that I would, share that because I found that to be really interesting. And so when I go to try to, change my diet in any sort of a way, I feel like I have to be really mindful, because I realize that even though I'm not diagnosed with mitochondrial disease, they haven't ruled it out, and it is a possibility, a strong possibility. And your mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. If there's anything I learned from school, or just randomly learning things, that is something that really sticks with, I think, most people. And so your organs in your body, your brain, your digestive system, your lungs, your heart, your major organs all need mitochondria in order for them to function properly. And with mitochondrial disease, your mitochondria do not function, or are not able to, in the way that that organ needs it to sustain and provide it with the energy that it needs to fully optimally function. And so for my mom, I believe that the parts of her that were most affected were her brain and her digestive system. So I know that, some people with this condition have some of their mitochondria affected, and some people have a lot of their mitochondria affected. And how many mitochondria are affected determines, how severe your symptoms are. And it can vary from person to person. It can vary from, within the same family. Some family members can have a lot of issues, and some can have maybe not as much. And looking at my overall family, line and all of that, I can see that my mom would have gotten this from my grandma, her mom. And there seems to be a lot of neurodivergence within my family, and a lot of undiagnosed neurodivergence or diagnosed neurodivergence. And so I found that to be interesting, because one of the characteristics of mitochondrial disease is autism. And it just is fascinating to me to, piece all of this together. And so I thought that I would share a little bit about it and talk a little bit about it. And upon trying to figure out how to best support myself and my body and researching it, I have read a couple of different books. And I will just show pictures as to what the books look like, in case anybody else is interested in maybe reading them. And so those books are mostly based off of different ways of eating that you can do to support your mitochondria. And one of them is called Eat for Energy. And I believe that that book is better than the other book. The other book is Fat for Fuel. And I think that that one is more so based off of like a keto kind of a diet. Um, and it's interesting because when I go to research about this and, what is the best way to eat if you have mitochondrial dysfunction or disease, or you want to just support your mitochondria, some things that I have found will say that you should not do a carnivore or a keto diet at all because it's really bad for your mitochondria. It can cause rapid like muscle wasting and, disintegration basically. And then on the other hand, there are some things that I've read that have said you should do a carnivore or a keto diet and it helps your mitochondria to function optimally. And so it's really confusing because there's two different, perspectives going on, and it's hard to know which one is accurate or right. But from what I gather, it depends on the type of mitochondrial disease you have that, determines which one would be better for you. And because I don't necessarily know which one my mom had or which one, if I had it, which one I would have, it's hard for me to know. But I do know that when I change my diet, or when I have tried to change my diet, which hasn't been often, I've tried to eat healthier at times, but not go on a diet. Um, the only other time that I've tried to eat like a specific diet would have been about 5 or 6 years ago. And I went on a low histamine diet when I was in the middle of my first really big mast cell flare up. And I didn't know that's what it was. I didn't know what mast cell activation disorder was at that time. I didn't know that's what I was dealing with or anything like that. I just knew I was having some kind of like an allergy issue and wanted to help it. And I discovered a low histamine diet and decided to try it. I was only able to stick with that for 2 weeks. And I don't know if that's because I was in the middle of a flare up and it was just bound to be a bad one, or if it's because the way I was eating was affecting me and making my flare up worse. So I wasn't carnivore, and I wasn't low carb, and I wasn't doing like keto or anything like that. I was doing gluten-free, dairy-free, low histamine fruits and vegetables. I still had like gluten-free donuts. I still had cereal and pasta and potatoes, all gluten-free, um, but all containing carbs. And so I was not, trying not to eat carbs or anything. But I ended up getting really sick. I ended up feeling like I could barely walk. My legs were very weak, really hard to bend my legs. And it felt like right at where my knee was, it was really unstable and almost like I was walking on stilts. I felt like my brain was really foggy, and really, really bad nausea. And when I went to go and have labs done at that time, I was told that I had a lot of ketones in my urine and that my body was trying to use a different source for energy. And that was really confusing to me because, like I said, I was eating donuts, I was eating things with carbs, and I didn't understand why my body would be going into like a ketosis kind of a state, I guess. And I got scared that if I continued eating that way, it was going to just progress and make things worse. And so I stopped. I went back to eating like pizza and carbs that I was eating before, like regular pasta, not gluten-free. And I did still try to eat healthy, like salmon and asparagus and things like that. But I also just went back to eating not gluten-free and not dairy-free. And I didn't feel good still. So it's not like, I felt a whole lot better from going back to eating how I was. But I noticed that trying to eat low FODMAP right now, I am feeling similar to certain symptoms that I experienced at those times as well. So like this morning I woke up and I had leg weakness. and almost felt like my blood sugar was off and felt like my electrolytes might have been out of whack. Just feeling really nauseated and sick, like I don't know how much I can eat gluten-free. And wondering if it is good for my mitochondria to try to do something like this or not. I tried to remind myself that before I even started eating low FODMAP, I was already experiencing symptoms where I was feeling really sick. And that's the whole reason I decided to try this. And I have at times experienced like leg weakness, other times as well. But this is just a different kind of a feeling that feels like it might be either related to my diet or related to a side effect from the cromolyn that I started. And I'm not sure, which one it might be, but I am just trying to, debate with myself here what I should do. So when I was researching about low FODMAP, I didn't go really deep into it. I just kind of knew that I had to avoid gluten, I had to avoid dairy and fructose. And like I said, I kind of my understanding of it and what I gathered was the maximum amount of time to be on it was 6 weeks. And sometimes I do the most and I try to, make things like go to an extreme. I take the most extreme approach to things that I try to do. And so in my mind, I thought if I do it for 6 weeks, that's going to be the very best, because then I can really give myself the full amount of time to have my body heal and make it through this process and everything and hopefully be better. And that's just how I didn't really look too much more into it. And so today I was really feeling like, am I going to be able to make it a full 6 weeks? As much as I want to, I don't know that I can. So I started researching a little bit more, and I was kind of surprised to see all of the information that I missed in, my laser focus on just trying to make it 6 weeks. And some of that information was that you're actually supposed to be on it between 2 to 6 weeks, and that sometimes people only need to be on it for 2 weeks, and that the goal of it is to try to get you to a place where your symptoms resolve. And once that you reach that spot, you're supposed to start reintroducing foods and see what you can tolerate and what you can't. And so you're not supposed to be on it very long, because it said you can develop nutritional deficiencies and it can disrupt your gut microbiome even more. And that's why they limit it to 6 weeks at the most. But a lot of people only need to be on it sometimes 3 or 4 weeks. And so for me, I don't necessarily know if I'm going to make it that full 6 weeks. I'm trying to make it at least 4, but I don't know, if I'm even going to be able to do that. It really depends. And so I also was looking at what you're supposed to eliminate as you're going through this, and I didn't realize just how much you are supposed to avoid. And it is really overwhelming. And I don't even know, how somebody would be able to do this for very long. But so the food groups that you're supposed to avoid are lactose, fructans, galactans, I think it's called, polyols, and fructose. And some of those I didn't even know what they were. And some of them are really confusing because they kind of overlap with one another and seem like they're kind of the same. Like the foods and everything are kind of similar in some of these groups. And so for me, my plan kind of changed. I sat down and I tried to make a plan. And I don't know if I'll be able to really do this entirely, but So my plan is to try to make it to 4 weeks, which would be February 3rd. And if I make it 6 weeks, it would be February 17th, which I really don't see that. So I'm aiming more for February 3rd. And then after that, for week 1, I plan to reintroduce lactose, which would be the first thing would be milk, and then butter, and then cheese, because I don't feel like I really do have that significant of reactions to that particular food group. And then the second group, the next week that I would reintroduce would be fructans. So those are things like pasta and bread. And that would be the first thing from that group that I would try to do. And then onion and garlic, which I do think is going to give me a little bit of an issue. So I'm going to try to, figure that out. And then cabbage, asparagus, beets, Brussels sprouts, chicory root fiber, and pinto beans. I tried to pick the foods from each group that I enjoy and that I eat, and tried to, figure out which ones I want to try to add back in. So when I was looking at all of these foods and what is kind of included in this, I realized that I actually eat a lot of these, and that's probably what was causing the issue in my gut in the first place. When it comes to galactans, I don't see any on there that I really need to reintroduce or anything like that. And then for week 3, I plan to reintroduce fructose, which the first thing is going to be mangoes. I eat mangoes often because it's a safe food for me histamine wise, and I usually don't have a really big issue with them. So I'm going to try that first. And then apples. Apples are also a safe food for me histamine wise, and they do sometimes cause an issue. I'm going to avoid juice, but also things on that list would be things like maple syrup, molasses, honey, coconut sugar, and coconut water. And it was really interesting as I was reading this because I realized, it just kind of took me back in my memory to the past few years when I started to think that I was having reactions histamine wise to some of these foods, but actually I was reacting to the fructose in them. So maple syrup and coconut water, when I would eat those two foods, I used to be able to tolerate them fine. But then I would say about like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I started to notice that not all the time, but sometimes after I would have coconut water, I would go to the bathroom like immediately. Or maple syrup too, but coconut water was worse than maple syrup. And so now that I discovered this and figured all of this out, I realized that in that situation particularly, it wasn't histamine related, it was or allergy related. It was an intolerance to the fructose. So I'm going to try to use those sparingly because I know that those will cause a greater reaction in me. But I'm going to try like the mangoes and the apple to start off with. And then week 4 is polyols. And those are things like sweet potatoes, celery, watermelon, and pears. And from that group, that's really all that I eat. So sweet potatoes give me the least problem, so I think I would start with that. And then celery, and then pears, and then watermelon. But I actually think I tolerate watermelon better than pears, so I'll probably try watermelon before I try pears. But I was just really surprised by how much I missed by not really planning a little bit better or looking more into it. So if I can't make it the full 6 weeks, and if I end up making it 3 weeks, like until next week, for example, I will just start trying to incorporate a little bit at a time, like maybe milk at first, and then just try to very slowly add the other things in so that I still stick pretty close to low FODMAP. But my main concern right now is just making sure that my body can function and that it has nutrients and that I'm able to try to, feel the best that I can. And it is so confusing because it's so hard to know if, it's just your overall health issues or if it is what you're eating. And again, I try to remind myself that the whole reason I began eating this way is because how I was eating before didn't make me feel good. So it's just it feels like a lose-lose situation here. But I do notice that the weakness is worse than it was before. So I feel like it's hard to eat gluten-free in some regard because I did occasionally have things that were gluten-free, but it was not my main way of eating. I ate, regular pasta and regular bread. And so eating just all gluten-free, it feels like it has been nauseating in some kind of a way, or like I'm having an aversion to it a little bit now at this point. And it's just really hard to continue on when you're not used to it, I guess. And then, just wondering if maybe there's even something in the gluten-free things that I might be sensitive to that I'm not realizing. And it is just difficult to try to figure out. But I'm going to try my best. I'm going to try to stick with it for at least 4 weeks and see what happens. And I just thought that I would share a little bit about what I missed in case it can be helpful to somebody else who decides to try this. And I will share the links, like I said, to the videos that I found interesting on the connection between mitochondrial disease, Ehlers-Danlos, POTS, and mast cell activation. And, and then make another video next week when I am done with this week and see if I'm still holding on to this low FODMAP diet or if I decided to add some things back in, and how I feel in all of that. So that is it for this one.